Hello and welcome. Thank you for downloading Season 1, Episode 28 of the CWSA podcast. I'm Chris Foles, the Executive Director of the Collegiate Women's Sports Awards presented by Honda.
Honda is a proud partner of the Collegiate Women's Sports Awards, the Honda Sport Award, and the Honda Cup. For more than 60 years in the United States, Honda has been committed to giving back to our communities, strengthening society, and helping people reach their life's potential. Through its partnership with the Collegiate Women's Sports Awards, Honda has been powering the dreams of the nation's top female collegiate student athletes since 1987. Learn more about Honda's corporate social responsibility initiatives at csr.honda.com.
The Collegiate Women's Sports Awards, known as CWSA, is and has been for the past 45 years the most prestigious athletic award program for collegiate female athletes in the nation. It is the only award program in the nation voted on by every NCAA institution's senior women administrator, naming 12 Division I Honda Sport winners, Division I top 3, and culminating with a prestigious Cup winner. The CWSA podcast features the Collegiate Women's Sports Awards honorees who represent the best of the best in college athletics. We hear about their achievements, experiences, and the lessons they have learned on their journey. We also discover where their life's path has taken them beyond their sporting career. We share these extraordinary athletes who belong to this elite sisterhood with you weekly on each Monday until June and our 45th celebration. This episode catches up with 2004 Honda Cup winner, swimmer from Stanford, and Olympian medalist Tara Kirk. Now, audience out there, please feel free to follow along with CWSA's social media, either on Collegiate Women's Sports Awards on Facebook and YouTube or at CWSA_Honda Cup on Twitter and Instagram. Follow CWSA on social media at WIS Sports, where show notes can be found at wisports.com on the CWSA page. Let me introduce to you our guest today, Tara Kirk.
Hi, everyone.
I won't hold back any of your acclaim as I do this, but let me make sure everybody knows who that voice came from. That was the American record holder in the 50-meter, 100-meter, 200-meter breaststrokes, and the 2004 Olympian in Athens. She's a recipient of the Outstanding College Female, not only Swimmer of the Year, but the Honda Cup for 2004, whose professional contributions are equally as impressive as her athletic ones. After a BA in Human Biology at Stanford, Tara, or should I say Dr. Tara Kirk-Sell, got her PhD at John Hopkins and currently serves as Senior Scholar and Assistant Professor in the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering and a Senior Associate at the John Hopkins Center for Health Security, serving as an expert witness at a congressional committee hearing on COVID-19. Tara, welcome again.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so exciting to talk with you today.
Well, thanks for being with us. Before we get to one of those most informed conversations on current issues that we might have on this whole podcast series, given your background and expertise, let's go back to your swimming days where this all started. You're born in Bremerton, Washington. What was your childhood like? How did you choose swimming?
Well, my parents live on the water, and so, it's a basic thing that they wanted all their kids to know how to swim. Both daughters, myself and my sister, who actually went to the Olympics as well. They wanted us both to learn how to swim, just so if we fell off the bulkhead, no one drowns. So we started swimming early, and wow, how fortunate. So it kind of went on from there.
Oh, exactly how fortunate. You took to the water easily, you at the breaststroke, and wasn't your sister Dana a flyer?
Yeah, so she swam butterfly. I did breaststroke mostly. Although before I was into swimming seriously, I did gymnastics. And one of the things that happened is that I fell off the bars in a meet, and I broke my arm and I had nerve damage. And so that's when my parents switched me to doing swimming more often and focusing more on that because I had to do rehab, and then I was still scared a little bit of gymnastics, and so ended up spending a lot more time in the pool than I had been before the accident.
And look where it led you. Oh my gosh. Matter of fact, it led you to being recruited as an exceptional student athlete. I'm wondering what that process like and what your fondest moments were at Stanford.
Yeah, so I started out, when I was a sophomore in high school, I was not very fast. I became much faster sort of in the later part of my high school years. I had been looking at information at colleges that didn't even have a swim program at that time. I remember when I was a sophomore, and my sister was the one who was into swimming much more seriously and better than me at it. And my mom kind of joked, well, wouldn't it be funny if Tara got a scholarship to Stanford? I got a lot faster. Coaches started paying attention more. I ended up at Stanford. So it was sort of a steep trajectory there. And of course, I think Stanford was, hands down one of the best choices I've ever made in my life. It's just a really idyllic place. It's the wonderful weather, swimming outside, being part of that great team, being part of that great tradition. Also having all the opportunities that have come along besides swimming because of the academics at Stanford and the connections that you make there. I can't really say enough good things about my experience there.
You do have kind of an interesting, different trajectory given the other swimmers who I've interviewed who were, great at 13 and 14 and 16. But we'll talk about some of the other trajectories later as well. You go on to finish your collegiate career, actually, 35-0. In the breaststroke, and of course, a fourth straight 100 breast title for the NCAA championships. You set a world record. I want to know what that feels like.
Well, it really feels, just very few things in your life can be that give you that much satisfaction. I just did it, and I felt like, man, I really, this is an accomplishment that is complete. And I felt really proud of myself. It was one of those things where, very few times can you have sort of something that is complete and you feel really, really, really great about it. And, you've accomplished something that is really meaningful for your field.
What was the best advice that you received on that journey? And what was the training like that led to this singular achievement?
Well, my coach was Richard Quick, and there were many, many wonderful assistant coaches who helped me on the way there, and Tim Edmonds and Jason Turcotte, who were incredible resources. All my coaches were. Later on, Lee Maurer, and I feel like they really sort of helped me be my best self when it came to training, to be tough and to, dig deep and to go do the things that I needed to do to get that achievement. Of course, I was talented, and that was obviously gave me a leg up. But you can't win a world record, and you can't go 35-0 unless you work hard and you have a solid training plan. And so I was fortunate enough to have great coaching from Richard and others, and that was really important to my success.
Do you happen to remember where you were in 2004 when you were named the Honda Cup winner?
I think I was probably at the pool. It was such a time. I was training for the Olympics at the time, and there was a lot going on. And I honestly did not think I was going to win that award. There were many great student athletes that year. And so, I was really surprised when I found out that I had won it.
In fact, Diana Taurasi of basketball fame, still playing professionally, Catherine Reddick, soccer, UNC, April Ross, volleyball at USC, all of those were in your class, and yet you became indeed the 2004 Cup winner. I'm wondering if you have any opinion about why it might be important and why this sort of recognition might still be important for women.
Oh, well, I think it's incredibly important. We still have a lot of barriers to overcome when it comes to women in sports, when it comes to women in, fields even like science, like I'm in right now. And I really appreciate other women and men who fight for, that equality, and to recognize that, the great things that women are doing in sports in the rest of the world. And so, I'm incredibly grateful that you lead this fight, Chris.
Well, I'm just, been handed off to kind of do my leg. So there are many coming before, and I hope many, many after. But it is, and we do have still a far way to go. I am always excited to reconvene with the swimmers who are Cup winners, as most of them showed up for the 40th anniversary. You were pregnant with your, I think, a first child, perhaps. Were not able to be with us, but I'm wondering if you would take a minute and share an adjective or two to describe some of the most decorated swimmers who are within the sisterhood of the Collegiate Women's Sports Awards, also Cup winners. I would like to play a little drill here. I'll say their name, and if you would say an adjective or two or something you learned from them, or just say pass and I'll go on to the next. Are you game?
I'm game.
Okay, Jill Sturko.
Well, Jill, I see as the matriarch of this women's swimming sort of movement here. And I remember actually being recruited by her, and I thought the world of her. I thought she was so amazing. Even though I ended up choosing Stanford, she is really, one of the people who has been part of it for this whole time. She was still in it when I was swimming. She was still working hard, and I've always looked up to her for that.
Tracy Calkins.
So Tracy Calkins and Mary T. Maher are two of those legends who I always heard about growing up. I don't think I've ever met either of them, yeah. But they were those sort of the legends that you hear about, that all the coaches tell you that they wish you could live up to. They're those people who broke those barriers before.
Well, we're going to get that date for the 50th anniversary on your calendar, because Tracy and Mary T have already promised they'd be there.
All right. Get it on my calendar. I want to be there. I want to meet them.
All right. Missy Franklin.
Yeah, so Missy, she's so talented, and so many different things that she has done. I was proud of her to win the award, and certainly, I'm glad that she's part of the sisterhood.
Christina Teuscher.
So Christina she was part of the sport, and certainly the people who sort of we had looked up to in the who were achieving right ahead of my I won't say generation, but my age group. Uh-huh. And so she was there ahead of that. And actually, it was so exciting. The other day, I got an email from her because, I've been working on COVID, and, she has been dealing with some things, with swimming and her swim school. And so we connected over that. And I said, I definitely remember you. I definitely am game to try to see what we can do. So it was great to really connect with her again.
Excellent. Katie Ledecky.
So Katie Ledecky and Simone Manuel are part of that special special sisterhood of Stanford swimmers who also, have won these awards. And I went to there's a Stanford sort of Hall of Fame place where they show all the different awards that different student athletes have gotten. And I was really flattered that, we were part of the same display. So that was really great to sort of be part of that group.
Mm-hmm. You and your sister, by the way, you passed this drill in flying colors.
Oh, thank you.
Great name recognition, and we'll get you all together. And indeed, it is Jill Sturkle who is in charge of getting the swimmers together on such occasions.
Yep. No question about that.
You and your sisters both swam, as you mentioned, on the Olympic team in 2004. What was the best and the worst of that?
Well, I think that Dana's and my swimming careers had always been sort of intertwined. I won my first junior national championship right after she won her first one. And I said, I got to keep up with her. I went to Stanford and then she went to Stanford and we always swam on the relay together. And, it was just a really something that swimming was something that we had together.
Tara, would you like to give us any insight that you can share with us about what it felt like returning to the site of the first Olympics as the 2004 Olympiad was held in Athens?
Well, I had a wonderful time at the Athens Olympics, and I loved the Greeks were such wonderful hosts. And it also felt like, even though there have been many Olympics after the first one, it did feel like coming home. I remember a sign outside the athlete village said, "Welcome home." And it was welcome home in so many different ways. Welcome home to the Olympics, welcome home to the athletes. And so it was sort of just, back to the original. And it was something that I think was really exciting to be at the site of the first Olympics.
Mm-hmm. You co-captained the 2007 World Championship team. You were, I think, a co-captain or a captain along the way for several teams. And I'm interested in knowing what it takes to be an effective captain of a team of elite athletes.
Yeah, so, I don't know how effective I was, but I would say the most important thing is to let people who are great do their thing, but still have people be bound together. It's hard to avoid the competition, and the different rivalries that emerge, because a lot of times U.S. teams, you bring two for each event, and you might be competing against other people in other countries around the world, but these are two of the best athletes in the world in that event, and so they're always going to be competing. So I think it's sort of trying to balance that, letting people do their own thing. Swimming is an individual sport, but tying people together to a sort of a group goal and a group effort, and being part of that movement.
Mm-hmm. As you look back, what qualities or attributes contributed to making you a champion? As I mentioned before, luckily I'm very talented in swimming, so that was helpful. But yeah. I think my sister and I both share an appreciation for hard work, and the value of feeling the accomplishment of a job well done. So we trained hard, we worked hard, we were precise. I thought that I was really interested in what sort of details I needed to do to make myself faster. And I suppose both my sister and I have a pretty high pain tolerance, so we could train pretty hard. That's something that some people don't always mention. We have people in team sports, particularly, who talk about getting through injuries, that it's part of the sport. But to have the high pain tolerance to train in the first place, that's a great catch. What was the transition? Well, let me ask you first this. There was something that happened with an unfortunate circumstance around the 2008 Olympics. And can you briefly describe that and then what you learned from it?
Yeah, so I was third at the 2008 Olympic trials by a hundredth of a second, and one of the people who beat me later tested positive for clenbuterol, which is a banned substance. But USA Swimming didn't put me on the team. The top two usually go. And so I think the thing that I learned from that is that you really shouldn't expect other people to look out for you. I think in swimming, you kind of, in a lot of sports, when you're an elite athlete, there's all these people sort of facilitating that. And at the end of the day, it's really, you got to look out for yourself, and you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to, advocate for yourself, because no one's going to do it for you.
Oh, how true. What was your transition like from competitor to scholar?
Well, so it was interesting. So I swam a bit through the end of 2008, a little bit. I think I retired right at the beginning of 2009. I wanted to end on my own terms. And so I did the World Cup circuit and traveled around the world and had a little more fun with swimming. And then I retired. I traveled a bit with my husband, and then, said, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And fortunately, this is where those Stanford connections come in. My husband's old college roommate's dad knew someone who was working in health security. And I said, I really want to work in health security. He said, well, I'll hook you up. So I got on the phone with my current boss, actually, and we talked, and behind the scenes, there was some advocacy for me, and I landed an entry level position, and it wasn't like I got this perfect golden opportunity. It was an opportunity for me to work hard and prove myself, and so it was actually very interesting coming from. It's hard for athletes to do this, I think, to come from being the absolute best and authority in what you're doing to in the highest point of it, to go to saying, okay, what's the next step of my career? And saying, oh, well, I got to basically start entry level. And not only do I have to start entry level, but I start entry level with people who are 5 years younger than me. And so I think, that is something you have to kind of swallow and get going on, if you're going to start in a career that doesn't involve your sport. And so, I worked hard and realized I also needed a terminal degree to make it in academia. And so I went to go get my PhD from Hopkins while I was still working at my job.
Well, it seems like you made that transition far easier than others who may not have known what they wanted to do. I've certainly talked with members who had a difficult transition from athlete to the rest of their lives. But it seems that you knew you wanted to do some health security issues. Tell me about that. How do you know that? What brings that? What classes bring that about? What experiences highlight that affinity?
Yeah, so I was a human biology undergrad at Stanford, and then I got a master's degree in anthropological sciences. And I really focused on that interaction between people and diseases. And a lot of time that will involve conflict. And so, I started learning about this infectious disease pandemic exercise called Dark Winter back in 2001. It was done in 2001, and it was about a smallpox attack on the U.S. And one of my faculty advisor really encouraged me to look at other resources around the issue of bioterrorism, and so I was very interested in it. And it turns out that my husband's roommate's dad was best friends with the person who ran the exercise. Oh. And so, it was sort of just that looking and figuring out what I wanted to do, but also, saying I need an exit strategy from my sport. And I don't think that I sort of conscientiously did that, although I recommend that people do that, is think, okay, I'm not going to swim forever. What am I going to do next? And how do I make it so I can get there? Because it's hard to do like cold turkey transition. Mm-hmm. You have to have the resources and the education and the plans in place ahead of time. Otherwise, you lose some momentum there. So that was pretty important.
How timely. Here you are interested in public policy responses to these epidemics. And America gets hit with something unlike anything but the flu epidemic, I guess. Walk us through your eyes and your filters and lenses, what it was like to hear about COVID a year ago, March, or unless you heard about it before.
Yeah, so I have been working on pandemic preparedness issues for almost 12 years now. And so, our whole center is focused on trying to do our best to prepare for and get a better response to this. And we've been making, there's been a lot of progress over time. And so actually, I think our center's first post on an unknown coronavirus from Wuhan was perhaps January 1st. And so, our center was following it. I was in the midst of trying to wrap up a project with CDC. So I was sort of paying attention with one ear, but I'm trying to, get that report in for the most part. And so, we were paying attention, and then it started growing, and all of a sudden our center became sort of a leading voice in the response to the pandemic. And all of the work that we had done was sort of applicable. The center has been working on these issues for almost 20 years now, and all that work was very applicable to basically everyone in the world. So it became like this niche issue that now was like front and center, and it was a really, really strange for that to sort of be the case. But, certainly I think that many of my colleagues and hopefully I have risen to that challenge.
Mm-hmm. What were the biggest challenges and what were the biggest rewards getting you to this point in time?
Well, I think, the challenges of, knowing that we were more prepared and could have done a better job in responding to COVID-19, and that we just, as a country, could not execute on those things. That was disappointing, and especially, working on something for so long and seeing, really not the best response out of it. That was kind of disappointing, but certainly, a lot of people coming to us for expertise and for, our thoughts is certainly, gratifying. When we actually, so I co-led an exercise in October 2019, and it was a simulated coronavirus pandemic. And many of the things that we sort of thought would be problems were problems. But fortunately, we were wrong about one thing, and that was that we did not think that vaccine could be developed and manufactured quickly enough to make a difference in the pandemic. And certainly, we're glad to be wrong about that.
Yeah, indeed. I've been jabbed twice and happy for it.
Yeah.
You've co-authored readiness or preparedness checklists, preparedness activities, from everything from community responses to, nuclear power plants. Are those assignments given to you, or are they interests that are piqued just by you being steeped in this culture?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think our center is always is a sort of has a team approach to a lot of different aspects, and so we have a lot of expertise in many different areas. And sort of we look through what do we think the problems of the day are, and where can we make a difference, and where can we translate science to practice in ways that actually will make meaningful impacts on the world. And so we're looking at a lot of different things. They all fall under the health security umbrella, which is it's really a bunch of different types of catastrophic health events. So pandemics and bioterrorism certainly apply, but also like nuclear consequence management and other sort of natural disasters that can cause really big events that can affect health. So that's all how it all ties together. It certainly sometimes seems a little bit different, but many of the responses flow through the same places in government.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think more than ever, yours is not a theoretical world.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Well, before it was fairly theoretical. And then when you're testifying in front of Congress about a pandemic that's, barreling down on us, it certainly feels more real than it used to when, we were sort of thinking, about exercising and planning and making scenarios for these events. Well, we don't have to do that anymore. We know what happens, and we know what happens in this one. I would, caution people who are taking lessons from this one to say, the next one, if we have another one, we we can't expect to vaccinate our way out of it, even though this one turned out well. We have a virus that has a very easy vaccine. It's a very easy vaccine target, and we've had 15 years of research on SARS. So, I don't think we should assume that we can get out of it that easily, and we don't need to do other things to prepare.
What are a couple of the bullets that you shared with that congressional committee?
Yeah, well, I talked about a couple of things with them. It was a House Science Committee, and so they're interested in all things sort of techie and nerdy. And actually, it was interesting. One of my Stanford teammates is married to one of the congressmen who was there at that hearing. And so it was sort of just, such a small world. Congressman Anthony Gonzalez had a really nice introduction for me, and I was really appreciative of it. So it was cool to just sort of have that connection, that Stanford connection there as well, with my former teammate, Elizabeth. So the main things that I spoke to them about were, I was working on a disease prediction sort of forecasting effort where you have like crowdsourced forecasting happening. A bunch of people who are both infectious disease experts and also just really excellent forecasters were able to join us on a platform and make forecasts about what was happening in different disease outbreaks that were happening over the course of the year. And we were able to turn it to COVID towards the end of the project. But, as we were so involved in the response, we sort of wound it down, in the late spring, early summer, just because we could not keep up with it. But, it shows that, as we crowd forecasting or collective intelligence, where you have a lot of people making forecasts together, is fairly accurate. And so it's another good way to sort of supplement different information sources you have about a disease outbreak. And the other thing I talked about was mis and disinformation and how to manage it. Our team had completed an evaluation of the Ebola of Twitter during the Ebola outbreak in 2014. And, many of these things that we see now were the same back then, just way more amplified now. And so, we've been working on those misinformation issues a lot more since then, and we've seen that mis and disinformation during a pandemic can really be damaging and can really undermine confidence in protective actions that are really necessary.
Call it my back in the day minor in social anthropology, but I've always been interested in groups and group behavior. And what I heard you say a few minutes ago was that we cannot expect to be vaccinated out of our next round of some more complicated virus. What's the human element of this? I mean, that mixed with information and misinformation and disinformation. Do we have people working on how to get through this so that with social media being so prevalent and misinformation being so rampant, that's got to be a huge challenge to the scientists?
Yeah, so you have touched on an issue that's really close to my heart, that these social behavioral factors are so critical to a response to an infectious disease outbreak or a pandemic. And often, I think, the focus is on data and on analytics and on, how we can use AI to do these types of things. And at the end of the day, there is this really important piece with social behavioral issues that I think sometimes gets ignored. And a lot of times communication gets ignored because everyone communicates, right? And everyone thinks they can do it well. But really, we've seen many missteps and those missteps can really have serious consequences. But, you can have the perfect plan or the perfect vaccine, but if you can't communicate well about it, or if people are too frightened by, false rumors to take a vaccine, you're right back at the beginning. So these issues are really important to address, and, trying to think through. One thing we've proposed is a national strategy to sort of make strides forward on mis and disinformation, and thinking through how can we get all the stakeholders involved rather than just saying, tech companies, you fix this, because I don't think that's really the solution.
Yeah. How is your family reacting to all this? Here that you're living it, you are in the academics studying this. You're raising the family in the heart of Baltimore. And what is there any role of sport in this whole thing for you and your family still?
Well, so I have been advising some groups on sports and talking through what should be happening and how we approach it, because I can't forget that I have I still have a lot of background in sports and thinking about how athletes think and need to go about some protective actions as we're doing different sporting events. My family, when it comes to Baltimore, so we loved Baltimore, but we actually recently just moved to the West Coast. I'm still working for Hopkins, but I'm working remotely, just to realizing that we're a whole country away from our families, and that we'd like to be closer. And this pandemic has really shown us that we can do things remotely. So that's something that has been, I think, a positive, at least part result from the pandemic, that we realized we could do a lot more. Why not try to make it happen?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
we'll be getting you in the same time zone then to one of our events in the next several years, if not the 50th, if you're on the West Coast, because we usually go to LA in June.
Yes, much easier for me to get to LA from Washington State than from Baltimore.
Yeah. Hey, Tara, what are the life lessons from sport that you learned, and how do they relate to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I think sometimes, I think the lesson here, the most important lesson that I think I've taken from sports is that sometimes you have to take criticism and either accept it and work on things that criticism, has implied you need to work on, or you need to just keep going and not worry about it. So you got a bad review, you get some angry email. Oh, well, let's keep going. I got work to do. So, I think that's probably been one of the most important things, and also, swimming and being in the public eye for that certainly taught me a number of things that have helped me grow a bit thicker skin when it comes to all the attention and controversy around the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we could talk forever about this most relative topic and what you are contributing. It's very impressive that you're part of this. And I always feel better when we have someone with a sport experience in any kind of situation, because you do have these life lessons that others are not as likely to have experienced. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we sign off?
Well, I think that it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that we still need to keep fighting the fight for equality and to pursue excellence and move forward in women's sports, that we are not there yet. And we need to know, it's great to have wonderful examples from different athletes who have excelled, but also to know that we have this movement, with women's sports, that we need to sort of all pitch in and, consider how important it is for ourselves and for our daughters and our granddaughters and everyone who will be coming behind.
Mm-hmm. Well, we couldn't say it any better. You've got advocacy groups who are rising right now to try to impact the NCAA and some of the symptoms that we have felt during the last basketball championship, and I'll take that as affirmation and encouragement that we all should keep on fighting the good fight. And working for that equality, not anti-men in any way, but certainly pro-women. Our daughters just deserve it, don't they?
Yep. I mean, I have a daughter who's 4. She always, when she plays video games with her grandpa, she always wants a girl character. She always wants to have girls she can look up to. And so, I'm just very fortunate to be friends with and know a lot of women athletes who can serve in that role.
Mm-hmm. But Tara, we're so happy that you joined so many of the others in being a positive role model, not only for a woman in sport, but a woman in science. We were thrilled to have you join us. and help us tell the story of our 45 years of the Collegiate Women's Sports Awards. We can follow you on social media. Would you give us your Twitter account there?
Yeah, it's at Skirkle, which is it's hard to actually figure it out. But if you think about if you're combining Kirk and Sell, it's SKIRKELL, and that's my Twitter account. I mostly tweet about nerdy COVID stuff, but
well, we hope that there'll be some nerdy people out there in the audience who will be grateful to have that conversation. At Skirkle, SKIRKELL.
Yep.
Correct?
That's it.
Okay. Well, listen, remember to follow at S. Kirkle, as we all thank Tara for spending this time and energy with us to let us catch up with one of our finest. Remember to follow WISP and CWSA on social media at WISP Sports, with show notes found at wisports.com on CWSA podcast page. And while you're on the website, check out the other conversations from the world of women's sports. Visit us at collegiatewomensports.com for more information about the awards and to see our roster of honorees and the list of podcasts. Thanks again, Tara, and everyone tune in.
Thanks for having me.
Next episode. Oh, you're welcome. Keep on doing good work. And everybody else, tune in next Monday to hear the story of our next Cup winner. Thank you for listening and helping us turn up the volume on women's sports. Onward.